All right. Hey guys, this is Idre here. This is a bit different of a review, or not a review, this is a bit different of a video. I'm going to be looking at Obscurify Music. It's a good website that really shows you what you're listening to. It shows you what you've listened to over the past 4 weeks and what you've been listening to since you started your Spotify, which for me was like 6 years ago, I think. So I am going to present that to you. All right. So here we go. We have current and all time. I already scrolled all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to go over my current stuff first. So coming in at number 37 on the stuff I've been listening to is the 1975. That's understandable. With the Jesus Christ 2005 song that recently came out, I've been listening to People a bit more, and some of their other albums. I've been really kind of getting into some of their stuff, anticipating a release. Coming in here is Santana at 36. This one's the oddball so far, mainly just because I haven't really listened much to Santana before, but I have been getting into it a bit more recently. I really like, you know, Black Magic Woman and some of that stuff. I recommend everybody check that out. And especially the Woodstock performance. 35, you have an expected one, Social Distortion, a good punk band, one of my favorite punk bands. 34, we have Lil Peep. Interesting description, LGBTQ hip hop. I don't know where they came up with that one, but that's interesting. Yeah, for those, I'm surprised Lil Peep's actually not higher. Lil Peep is one of my favorite current, well, sort of current artists. Obviously, he's not here anymore. But yeah, at 33, we have Screeching Weasel, a good skate punk band, a band that I've always kind of constantly listened to moderately. My Brain Hurts, great album. Love that album. One of the best skate punk ones of the 90s. Let's see. Furthermore, The Lookouts. That's not really unexpected. They're relatively unknown outside of the Green Day community because obviously they're known from being the namesake of Lookout Records, a great punk label from the East Bay area. Honestly, I think the Lookouts is one of the greatest East Bay punk bands. Even if they're kind of goofy, I think Trey Cool being young and all that, it's just fun. Hey, Sex Pistols at 31. That one's surprising. I didn't know I was really listening to them that much, but all right. Life Looks Good. That's actually a local band. A guy that I know. He's been in a whole bunch of other bands. I wonder if I actually don't. I wouldn't be surprised if some of his previous bands are on here. But yeah, Life Looks Good. Good band, kind of Fall Out Boy like, but decent. Dead or Alive at 29. You could also see them all the way over here. Not a lot of people would call that a guilty pleasure just because it is kind of a little more less serious. But I think they're one of the best synth pop dance high energy groups of the 80s. I think they're way more influential and way more than just a one hit wonder like a lot of people make them out to be. Peter Murphy. This is really expected because I love Bauhaus. I love Peter Murphy's trademark singing. I love his writing. After all, I did do a cover of Strange Kind of Love. If Peter Murphy's here, then Bauhaus has to be here too. Wow, that was unexpected. Bauhaus is right above. Usually those two go hand in hand just because I listen to them usually at the same time. But I brought up Bauhaus in my record collection video where I was talking about how Bauhaus I think is one of the greatest of the it's really I think one of the greatest goth bands of all time. And one of the greatest bands of the 80s. Let's see what's at 26. Bad Religion? Yep. Also very expected. Really great punk band. One of my favorite ones. I love their large discography. Let's see. Let's just keep going. Paul McCartney. Yeah, I've been listening to more Beatles and his solo stuff lately. Paul McCartney is my favorite Beatle, by the way. Let's see. Face to Face. Once again, following that same trend. Ramones still done a punk thing, and Cherryhead. There they are. There's my guys. Obviously, I just interviewed them recently, so that's not the whole. That's really not even the only reason they're on here. I genuinely enjoy their music quite a bit. I recommend everybody check it out. Poppy 21. That's nice to see because I regret giving that Poppy album a 6 out of 10. I would probably give it an 8 out of 10 now. I can tell you all those streams are probably from that album. I think that album is really strong. I think it's grown on me quite a bit. I really enjoy it. Morrissey at 20. That's mainly because I was reviewing the I'm Not a Dog on a Chain album. Oh God, Dookified. This is a guy who takes new Green Day songs and makes them sound like they're from Dookie. Surprising I said hi. Kind of a little embarrassing, but uh, they're really good. I recommend people check it out. If you like early Green Day and you're not a big fan of some of the newer sounds of Green Day, there's some like a lot of the stuff from the trilogy sounds really good in like Dookie form. Like Cure at 18. I think we're getting into like more 80s territory. Really good, really great band. I haven't really talked about them much on my channel other than in my all-time in my 5 seconds of summer review. But I've always been a fan. They're definitely one of my top bands of all time. Lil Uzi Vert, 17. This is my thing. A lot of people after my negative Eternal Take reviews have this idea that I am like anti Lil Uzi Vert and I think that his music's trash, but that's simply not true. Love is Rage 2 and Lil Uzi Vert versus the World 1 are some of the greatest albums that have come out of this whole like new wave of hip hop over the past 5 years. I think they're great. I really like it at least. Let's see. Ed O'Brien, yeah, I've been listening a lot to that, the new album. It's actually pretty good. I like that quite a bit. I doubt Radiohead's on. I never know. Radiohead might be on here. I would have think they'd already shown up by now. James Leroy, I interviewed him recently as well. He's been putting out some good Midwest emo EPs lately. Go check those out. Nine Inch Nails. We're getting to the area where I start doing the reviews. But yeah, Nine Inch Nails, their most recent albums are really good, ambient. Some of the best ambient albums I think I've heard in a while, since C418 at least. BTS 13. I used to call this my guilty pleasure, but not anymore. I genuinely enjoy it, and I'm not afraid to admit it. They're really good. That 7 album is really, really good. Map of the Soul. I also been listening to Wings is a really good one, and some of those older ones, they're really good. Obviously, it's not for everybody, but I appreciate good music when it's there, even if it's my style or not. 5 seconds. See, this is okay. That's because I reviewed them. I've barely listened to them since I did that, to be completely honest. The Offspring coming in number 11. That's expected. I love The Offspring. I did my Smash review, one of the greatest albums of the 90s. I might do their first album. I think that's a really good raw punk album. I might even do one of their later ones, like Rise and Fall, because I think they still have it. They just haven't put anything out in a while. I hope they do. Now we're getting to top 10. Don Toliver, number 10. This is expected. Don Toliver, I've listened to that album quite a bit. I think that he's massively overlooked in the hip hop, or not into hip hop, but in the mainstream. His style translates so well over to the mainstream that I find it crazy that he is often overlooked. Like, I feel like not many people are big fans of him. They don't hate him, but they don't know him. But if you like Travis Scott, definitely check out Don Toliver. At number 9, oh, there's Radiohead. Yeah, Radiohead's always been one of my top bands. I go through phases with them though, because it reminds me of times sometimes like not happy times, but for the most part, I think Radiohead, one of the most advanced, one of the greatest bands of the 21st century and the 90s. Wonderful. The Chats at number 8. Great punk band. If you watch my review, you know I really dig that album, and for good reason. It's one of the best raw punk albums, one of the most pure punk albums I've heard in a long time. Now, I've heard Green Day albums. I've heard all these other big punk bands that put out albums, and I don't know, even the ones that are good, this one's just so much better. I don't know, it's just so much more unique. They're fun. They have a good sense of humor. I love to see what these guys do. Gigi Allen at number 7. This one's also kind of a little bit guilty pleasure-ish. A lot of people really hate Mr. Gigi Allen. A lot of people think he's insane, and he is. And that is why people listen to him. Now, do I take him seriously? Not really. I don't see why anybody would take him that seriously. But I do think that yeah, he made some of the best hardcore punk, and I think there's no denying that. Punk should have no rules, and I think he is the epitome of that. No matter how crazy he is, or no matter how wrong you think he is, I think that he's pretty crazy, and he fits the punk description. I don't care what anybody says. I think Bite It You Scum, I think Hated in the Nation, all those releases are pretty good. Rock and Roll Terrorist, all really nice. All really good, solid punk albums. So, yeah, everybody check that out. He's better than people make him out to be. XXX, Tentacion at number 6. This one, once again, another controversial figure, but I've talked about him pretty heavily on my channel a bit. Pretty much saying that, just because he's controversial doesn't mean he's bad. And I think that his music is massively underrated and from a critical sense. Obviously, he's extremely popular. You can see that by the popularity index right there. But I'm sorry. I like good music. Oh, no. All right, so there's me, number 5. Now, it may make me sound very egotistical, but that's not the case. I always listen to my stuff to make sure everything's going smoothly because I do use DistroKid, and I know every now and then DistroKid has some issues with the formatting, with all that. I'm actually still waiting for a single that should be out any second now, and I have had some issues that I found while listening. So I do make sure everything's going smoothly over on my account. That being said, I do also listen to my stuff just so I could get inspired to write more. Know where I was when I wrote that, expand on as a musician. That's why I rank highly, just because so oftentimes once it's on Spotify, I use Spotify to listen to my music, not my iTunes or whatever. But yeah, that's why that one ranks a little high. Depeche Mode at number 4. That's actually pretty low. I thought they would have been higher, but I bet you this will all make a little bit more sense once we see who's higher. Yeah, Depeche Mode, obviously my favorite band of all time. That's not even a question. Yeah, I don't even need to explain anything there. Waves, number 3. See, that's also like, yeah, this makes sense now. I have been listening to Waves quite a bit. I do think Waves is one of the greatest artists of the 2010s period. I think they revolutionized the California surf punk sound that they are really heavily into. I think Nathan Williams is also a very underappreciated songwriter, even if his lyrics may not be like the most advanced or most technical. I genuinely enjoy it. Let's see. Top 2. Okay, number 2. Okay, well, now I'm actually confused who's number 1, to be completely honest. Oh, wait, never mind. I'm not. I get it now. So Post Malone's number 2. Once again, Post Malone is my favorite artist of the past 5 years. I think that he's also one of those artists that is extremely popular but doesn't get the credit he deserves from a critical standpoint. They often push him aside as being too not serious enough. But I reviewed Hollywood's Bleeding. I reviewed Stoney. I'll probably review Beer Bongs and Bentleys, but genuinely love his music. I genuinely do. Just great. I love his uniqueness and his style. And number 1 is Green Day. That's expected. And no, it's not because I've been listening to Father of All. It's because I've been listening to 39 Smooth. I've been listening to Kerplunk, Dookie, Nimrod, Insomniac, American Idiot, etc. Right now, I've been on my Green Day kick again. I usually go up and down with them, but I mean, I've talked about them all the time. I don't need to talk about them more. Let's look at all time a little bit. Number 50 is Chuck Berry. I was really into 50s music for a while. That's why he's even on here, and I still like it just as much as I used to. But I really I think he's one of the best ones from the 50s. I already talked about Dead or Alive. Ozzy Osbourne at 48. Ozzy Osbourne's solo material is better than people make it out to be, I feel. It often gets written off as cheesy, and I do actually think that pretty much everything he put out after like the mid-90s is pretty cheesy, with the exception of his most recent album, Ordinary Man. But his 80s work and his early 90s, No More Tears, is all pretty solid in my opinion. Black Sabbath at 47. Obviously, some of these bands don't even need an introduction. Obviously, if Ozzy's on here, Black Sabbath is on here. One of the 4 founders of metal. Obviously, they're on here. Oasis at 46. I personally like Oasis more than Blur. That's just my personal opinion. I think their first two albums are some of the best Britpop albums out there, some of the best albums of the 90s. And they get a bad rep. They get a really bad rep with Wonderwall. And I often get pushed aside as cheesy Beatles wannabes. And well, yes, they are Beatles wannabes. I think that their first two albums have some good substance to them. Dave Gone, his solo stuff. This is I do want to take some time here because I do think that his solo stuff's often overlooked. For those who don't know, he's the lead singer of Depeche Mode. But yeah, Paper Monsters is a great album. That's his debut. Then he would do Hourglass and can't with like Kingdom and all that. Also pretty solid. I'm not as crazy about that one, but he would go on to do Soul Savers stuff later, join Soul Savers, and my favorite thing with him was Angels and Ghosts was Soul Savers. I think that's a really solid blues album. I think he's really good. And obviously that song that I reviewed in the beginning of this channel, Shock Collar, is another good addition to his solo career. Small Faces, one of my favorite mod bands from the 60s. A band that often, once again, gets overlooked. I think Small Faces is one of the best bands of the 60s, and I will stand by that. I think they have a pretty good, solid sound. I think they have a good persona. I really like the whole mod thing. 43, Johnny Cash. Great country artist, great rockabilly, great 50s, 60s, 70s. He's been doing music. He did music his whole life. Once again, an artist without much introduction. 42, Operation Ivy. I love this band. One of the greatest East Bay punk bands there is. And ska punk bands, for the record, kind of helped pioneer that genre into where it would go in the 90s. Obviously, they would later form Rancid, which I'm sure will probably be higher on this list. But yeah, Operation Ivy, great band. Influenced Green Day, influenced Rancid, influenced all these bands. Young Thug at 41. Young Thug. One of the most unique rappers out there, one of the most recognizable rappers out there in the modern scene. I think his voice and his style and even his instrumentals are all very unique. And a lot of rappers try to copy him, but nobody comes close, I feel. There he is, C418. At number 40. Obviously, this guy gets a reputation for Minecraft, and I do think that that album is really good. It's his best album, Volume Alpha. Great album. I recommend everybody check it out if you like Minecraft or not. Either way, though, this is some of the best ambient music of recent years, I believe. Really strong, really well put together. Everybody should check this out, unironically. That's how I feel. Lil Uzi Vert at 39, already talked about him. Motorhead at 38, one of my favorite metal-ish, punk-ish bands. Also, it sucks that they're all pretty much dead now, but Lemmy's bass playing really inspired me early on to get into doing more rock music and play bass guitar, even if it isn't technically the best. His tone and the band's energy, one of my favorite metal bands. Okay, Rancid, I knew they'd be on here. I don't really need to cover much about them. I already talked about Operation Ivy. I already talked about G.G. Allen. Queen at 35. I've always had mixed feelings about Queen. I think that some of their stuff is really good, really underrated. I think other stuff is decent, but also pretty overrated. And I like songs like 39, I think are some of their best ones. That's obviously Brian May. But I do think some of like the really big stuff, it's so overplayed at this point. It's like they have so much music that you could be listening to, and everybody listens to Bohemian Rhapsody and like We Are the Champions and Under Pressure, and they just have, in my opinion, they have so much better. Oh no, Jeffree Star at 34, ultimate guilty pleasure, the biggest guilty pleasure on this list. Yeah, that pretty much explains it. Electro power pop. Yeah, it's goofy. It's definitely not serious. It is what it is, but I like it. I do, and that's all I have to say. I see him. Kanye West at 33. Obviously, one of the most influential artists of the past 2 decades. I think his peak was around 2010, 2013. I really, really, really love the Yeezus album. And I also do love Ye from 2016. Or not 2018. A lot of people say that's one of his worst ones, but I strongly disagree. Eminem at 32. He's one of the greatest. I don't care what anybody says. He's one of the greatest rappers. Smashing Pumpkins at 31. I went through a pretty big Pumpkins phase where I was really into some of that 90s alternative. So that's unsurprising that they're on here. And once again, BTS at 30. Tyler Yahweh, I haven't talked about him too much. I did a review of his remix of High Right Now, but he is a Post Malone protege. And I think he has a lot of career ahead of him. I've been listening to him for quite a while at this point, and before he was like starting to get big. So it's kind of nice to see him start to get big. Keen at 28. Um, Keen is undeniably, I think, one of the greatest British groups of the 2000s decade. I think that Under the Iron Sea is one of my favorite albums of all time. Honestly, it's one of the greatest pop albums of all time. Massively overlooked. They often get compared to Coldplay so much, but in my opinion, they're so much better. Face to Face, I already talked about. Lookouts, I already talked about. Powerhouse, I already talked about. Social Distortion, I already talked about. Effects Twin, finally, somebody new. Ambient music, I love ambient music. I said this in my 9 Inch Nails reviews. Selected Ambient Works Volume 2 by Effects Twin is honestly probably my favorite ambient album of all time. I love the synths that he uses. I love the sounds and it's just so spacey. It's really good. I think he's one of the most innovative electronic artists out there. The Cure, talked about. Cranberries, I haven't talked about. Like the Pumpkins, I was listening to the Cranberries a lot a few years back. Honestly, right around the time Dolores died. Um, but I think that they're also one of those groups that is really popular, but often gets pushed aside as one-hit wonder with the Zombie, at least over here. And they have a lot of good material, a lot of it. And yeah, I love the Cranberries. Waves at 20, I already talked about them. Ramones talked about them. Peter Murphy talked about them. Oh, there we go. Guns N' Roses. Um, quite a few years back, I was really obsessed with Guns N' Roses, and I'm not as obsessed with them now, but I still appreciate Appetite for Destruction and the Use Your Illusion albums. I do think that some of their later stuff's really rough, but there's no denying, in my opinion, the influence that they had on the popular metal scene, on grunge even, with Appetite for Destruction and Use Your Illusion. Some of the best hard rock out there, in my opinion. Juice World, sucks that he passed away. I don't think I've talked much about him on this channel, but I think Juice WRLD's one of the best artists to come out of this era, alongside Post Malone and X and Uzi and all them. There's me again. Tom York solo. Tom York solo. I saw him solo live, and I think that his when he's solo, he's the most. He's the most free. He's able to explore all the electronic sounds he wants, and he always makes it work. The Beatles. There they are at number 13. I'm honestly a little surprised the Beatles weren't on the current, because I've been listening to them a bit. At least I think I have, maybe on YouTube. But I feel like the Beatles are one of those artists where some days I think that people overhype them. Other days I think that they're great. I think that it does get tiring seeing them at number one of every single list. But I'm not one of those people that just hates them because they're popular. I think that there's a lot of substance there, and there's a reason why they're as big as they are. Obviously, there's not much that needs to be said. Little Peep. I think we're going to get to all the ones we talked about pretty much. Little Peep. Oh, Led Zeppelin at 11. We have not talked about Led Zeppelin. Around when I was listening to Guns N' Roses, I was really listening to Led Zeppelin pretty heavily. And obviously, that's a group like the Beatles. There isn't much that needs to be said that hasn't already been said. Great. Elvis at 10. Elvis is awesome. I don't care what people say. I know people have mixed feelings lately, but overall, I think Elvis is one of the greatest singers. He has one of the best discographies. I like his 50s stuff a lot. I like his 70s stuff a good amount. I'm not crazy about the 60s era, the movies and everything, but it's Elvis. There's a reason why he's on the top 10. Bad Religion talked about. XXX talked about. Pink Floyd. There we go. Pink Floyd to me is definitely on my top 10 of all time. A really ahead of their time band, but even though I say that, they're kind of their own thing. Have they don't fit into any period because 'cause they're just that unique. I love Pink Floyd. The Who, my favorite classic rock band, if you don't include, like, Pink Floyd. I think they have a really distinguishable sound. I love their songwriting. I love their early, more British sounding stuff. I love their later, more hard rock and more rock operas. Quadrophenia is without a doubt one of my favorite albums of all time. I think it's one of the best rock operas of all time. Radiohead, I talked about. Post Malone talked about. Offspring, I talked about. Green Day, and Depeche Mode. That was expected. This video is already pretty long, so I'm not going to talk much more. Moods, interesting. I don't think it's that high. Energy higher. That's weird how energy and danceability don't go together. Acousticness is extremely low. I wonder why that is. Let's look at something really quick, though. Just really quick, let's look at my tracks. Alright, this makes a good amount of sense. PewDiePie. I knew PewDiePie was going to be in there. These are my most listened to songs lately. A lot of Green Day, a lot of Waves, a lot of Cherry Heads in there. Some of my stuff. Post Malone's in there. Yeah. Poppy. Yeah, this is expected. What about of all time? A lot of Depeche Mode. A lot of Depeche Mode. Yep. All right. So that's it for now. A long video, but I'm bored on quarantine. Nothing else to do. Probably nobody's gonna watch this because it's not anything specific, but that's about it for now. Goodbye. How do I end this? There we go.